The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows through the dense trees of the forest as I stood at the edge of the trail with my friends, Sarah and Jake. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that prickled the back of my neck and sent chills down my spine. "Are you guys ready for this?" I asked, trying to mask my unease with a smile. "Ready as I'll ever be," Jake replied, his voice booming with excitement, his backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder. He was always the adventurous one, the instigator of our little escapades. Sarah, on the other hand, seemed more reserved, her eyes darting toward the trees as if they were hiding secrets. "Come on, Emma, it's just a hike. What's the worst that could happen?" Sarah teased, nudging me with her elbow. "You're not scared of a few legends, are you?" I hesitated. The legends were the reason I felt a knot forming in my stomach, but I didn't want to ruin the mood. "No, of course not," I lied, forcing a laugh. "Just thinking about how beautiful it is out here." As we ventured deeper into the forest, the sounds of birds chirping and leaves rustling surrounded us, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting and turning in strange shapes, shadows dancing on the ground. I had heard the stories, tales of people disappearing without a trace, swallowed up by the very woods we were exploring. But I had always brushed them off as mere folklore, mere exaggerations meant to scare children. "Hey, wait up," I called, as I noticed Jake and Sarah moving ahead, their laughter echoing through the trees. They were already a few paces ahead, and I felt a sudden urge to catch up, to not let them out of my sight. But something caught my eye, a glimmer of light filtering through the underbrush. My heart raced with curiosity, and before I knew it, I had stepped off the main path, drawn towards the mysterious shimmer. "Emma, where are you going?" Sarah's voice echoed behind me, but I was too entranced to turn back. The light danced like a beacon, luring me deeper into the woods. I could hear my friends' voices fading, but I couldn't resist the urge to explore. The undergrowth was thick, and I had to push aside branches and brush to make my way toward the light. As I stepped into a small clearing, I stumbled upon what appeared to be an altar, overgrown with moss and vines. The stones were arranged in a circle, covered in strange, cryptic symbols that I couldn't decipher. My heart raced, not with excitement but with dread. "What is this place?" I whispered to myself, stepping closer to examine the symbols. A chill ran down my spine, and I felt an unsettling presence, as if the air had thickened around me. The beauty of the forest had morphed into something sinister, and the stories I had dismissed suddenly felt all too real. "Emma!" I heard Sarah's voice break through the fog of my thoughts. "Where are you?" Panic surged through me as I turned to call back, but the words caught in my throat. I had ventured too far, and the path I had taken was now obscured by the trees. I felt the panic rise within me, tightening my chest. "I'm here. I'm coming back," I shouted, but my voice felt weak and far away. I retraced my steps, but everything looked different. The trees seemed to twist and turn, blocking my way back to the trail. My heart pounded in my ears, and the feeling of being watched intensified. "This isn't funny, guys," I called out again, but only silence answered. Every rustle of leaves felt like a whisper, and every snap of a twig made me jump. My anxiety turned to dread as I realized how truly lost I was. "Emma, think," I told myself, trying to calm my racing heart. I took a deep breath, trying to remember the direction I had come from. Just then, I heard a rustle behind me, and I froze, my breath hitching in my throat. "Emma!" It was Sarah's voice, and relief flooded through me. "Where are you?" "I'm here. I'm lost," I shouted back, my voice cracking. I turned and started to run toward her voice, pushing through the underbrush with frantic energy. "I found something. It's strange, and I don't think we should be here. Just stay where you are. We're coming." Jake's voice joined Sarah's, and I felt a flicker of hope. A few moments later, I burst through the thicket, stumbling into a small clearing where my friends stood, their faces etched with worry. "What happened? You just disappeared," Sarah exclaimed, rushing to my side. I found something. An altar or something? I said, trying to catch my breath. I looked between them, searching for understanding, but their expressions were mixed with disbelief. An altar? Jake raised an eyebrow, skepticism lacing his voice. What, like in those creepy stories? Come on, Emma, you're just trying to scare us. No, I'm serious, I insisted. It was covered in symbols and it felt wrong. I felt something there, something watching me. Maybe it was just your imagination, Sarah suggested gently, though I could see the flicker of fear in her eyes. We've been hiking for a while. It's probably just exhaustion. I shook my head, feeling the weight of what I had seen press down on me. No, I'm telling you, we shouldn't be here. I heard things, stories about people who went missing in these woods. I don't want to end up like them. Suddenly, a loud, piercing scream shattered the stillness of the forest. My heart dropped into my stomach, and I felt the blood drain from my face. The sound echoed through the trees, sending a wave of terror coursing through me. What was that? Jake whispered, his bravado evaporating. I don't know, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. Fear gripped me, and I could see that Sarah was shaking. We need to get out of here. Now. Okay, let's head back to the camp, Jake said, his voice steady but his eyes betraying his fear. We started retracing our steps, but the forest felt different now, darker and more oppressive. The trees seemed to close in around us, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, lurking just beyond the shadows. I glanced back at my friends, their faces pale and tense. You guys, do you believe me now? I asked, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. Yeah, I believe you, Sarah said quietly, her eyes darting around. Maybe we should have listened to the stories? Let's just keep moving, Jake urged, his voice firm. We'll get back to the camp, and this will all be just a stupid hike we'll laugh about later. But I couldn't shake the sense of dread that hung in the air. As we continued, I could feel the shadows growing longer, the forest closing in around us. I wanted to believe that we would make it back safely, but deep down, a part of me feared that we had awakened something we couldn't understand. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we broke through the trees and stumbled into the small clearing where we had set up our camp. But there was something unsettling about the scene. The fire pit lay cold and dark, and our tents stood eerily still. Where's Jake? I asked, glancing around frantically. He was right behind us, Sarah exclaimed, her voice rising in panic. Jake, she called out, her voice echoing through the trees. But all we received in return was silence, thick and suffocating. Maybe he went to the bathroom or something? I suggested, but even as I said it, I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. Let's wait for him, Sarah said, her voice trembling. We sat on the ground, eyes glued to the path we had just come from. But as the minutes stretched on, the air grew heavier with tension. Something's not right, I whispered, my heart racing. We should look for him. Emma, I don't think that's a good idea, Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. What if he's in trouble? I shook my head, frustration boiling within me. We can't just sit here. We have to do something. As if on cue, a rustle echoed from the trees, and both of us jumped to our feet, eyes wide with fear. Jake, I called out, my voice trembling. But there was no response, only the ominous silence of the forest surrounding us. Let's go look for him, I insisted, adrenaline coursing through me. We can't just leave him out there. Sarah hesitated, fear etched on her face, but I could see the resolve building within her. Okay, but we stick together, all right? Always, I promised, taking a deep breath as we stepped back into the shadows of the trees, the weight of the forest pressing down on us as we moved further away from the safety of our camp. The thrill of adventure had vanished, replaced by a heavy sense of foreboding that I couldn't shake. As we ventured deeper, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows through the trees as we made our way deeper into the forest. I could hear the excited chatter of my friends Sarah and Jake as they led the way, their laughter echoing in the serene wilderness. I had always loved nature, and there was something invigorating about hiking, the thrill of exploring the unknown. Yet, as I walked, a chill crept up my spine, a nagging sensation that something was off. Perhaps it was the stories I'd heard about this area, the local legends of people going missing, swallowed by the woods without a trace. "Come on, Emma. Keep up," Jake called back to me, his voice teasing. "You're not scared, are you?" "Of course not," I retorted, trying to shake off the unease. My heart raced as I remembered the hushed conversations of adults in town, their warnings about the forest. Just admiring the view, that's all. As we continued, I found myself drawn to a narrow path that veered off from the main trail. A faint glimmer caught my eye, shimmering between the trees like a beacon. Without thinking, I told my friends I'd be right back and ventured off, curiosity getting the better of me. The underbrush crunched beneath my feet, and the further I walked, the more I felt that familiar sensation of being watched. It was unsettling. After a few moments of walking, I stumbled upon a clearing where the air felt thick and heavy. In the center stood an altar draped in strange, cryptic symbols. My heart raced as I approached, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. It looked ancient, as if it had been there long before any of us existed. I could almost hear whispers in the wind, but they were indistinct, unsettling. "Get back," a voice inside me urged. I took a step back, my instincts screaming that I should leave. I turned and hurried back the way I came, but when I reached the spot where I had left Jake and Sarah, they were nowhere to be found. Panic surged through me. "Guys!" I called out, my voice echoing in the eerie silence. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. "This isn't funny," I yelled, desperation creeping into my tone. I scanned the area, but the forest seemed to mock me with its stillness. I took a few cautious steps forward, hoping to catch a glimpse of my friends, but it was as if the trees had swallowed them whole. After what felt like an eternity, I finally spotted Jake and Sarah in the distance, their silhouettes barely visible against the fading light. I rushed over to them, relief flooding my veins. "Where were Voces? I thought I lost you." "Relax, Emma," Jake said, rolling his eyes. "We were just a few feet away. You really need to chill out." "I found something," I said, trying to convey the urgency of my experience. "There's an altar back there, and it felt wrong." "Aren't you being a little dramatic?" Sarah chuckled, brushing it off. "It's probably just some old camping gear. Let's just enjoy the night." "Yeah, Emma," Jake added with a smirk. "Next, you'll tell us there are ghosts in the trees." Their laughter rang in my ears, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The stories lingered in my mind, the tales of disappearances and the whispers of the forest. I glanced around, the trees now looming ominously in the twilight. But before I could express my concerns, a shrill scream shattered the evening calm, echoing through the air. We all froze, the laughter dying in our throats. A chill swept over me, and I felt my blood run cold. "What was that?" I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. "I don't know," Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "It came from deeper in the forest." "Should we check it out?" Jake asked, but his bravado faltered as he glanced around nervously. "No way," I said, shaking my head vigorously. "We should stick together and head back to the campsite. It's not safe here." We made our way back, the atmosphere heavy with tension. Each rustle of leaves or snap of a twig made me jump, my mind racing with thoughts of what could be lurking in the darkness. As we reached the campsite, I felt a sense of relief wash over me, but it was short-lived. "Where's Jake?" I asked, glancing around. "Wait, he was right behind us," Sarah exclaimed, her eyes wide with panic. "Jake!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "This isn't funny. Come on." Silence enveloped us, and dread settled in my stomach as the realization hit me. We had lost him. My heart raced as I pulled out my phone, hoping to call him, but the screen displayed no signal. "I can't reach him. What do we do?" "Let's go find him," Sarah said, determination in her voice. He can't be far. A wave of anxiety washed over me as I remembered the altar and the feeling of something sinister lurking in the woods. I don't think we should go back into the forest. I hesitated, glancing over my shoulder at the darkened tree line. What if something happened to him? Emma, we can't just leave him out there, Sarah insisted, her brow furrowed. If we don't go now, it could be too late. I swallowed hard, torn between my fear and the need to find our friend. The forest felt alive, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for us to make a move. All right, I finally said, my voice shaking, but we stay together. No one wanders off. As we ventured back into the woods, the air felt heavier, and the shadows danced menacingly around us. Each step felt like a step deeper into a nightmare, and the silence was suffocating. My mind raced with thoughts of Jake, and the more I thought about him, the more I felt that something was terribly wrong. Look, Sarah said suddenly, pointing to the ground. What are those? I bent down to examine the soil, my heart sinking. There were strange marks, deep grooves etched into the earth, as if something had been dragged along the ground. I don't like this, I whispered, my voice barely audible. What if it's something bad? We have to keep going, Sarah urged, her grip tightening around her flashlight. Jake needs us. The deeper we went, the more anxious I became. The trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers reaching out for us. Every rustle in the underbrush sent shivers down my spine. This place is wrong, I muttered, more to myself than to Sarah. Stop it, Emma. You're freaking me out, Sarah replied, her voice trembling slightly. Think positive. We'll find Jake, and everything will be fine. But as we pressed on, I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was watching us, waiting for us to slip up. I glanced at Sarah, who was now scanning the surroundings with wide eyes. Maybe we should turn back, I suggested, my voice trembling. We have no idea what we're walking into. Just a little further, she insisted, determination set in her features. We can't give up. We continued deeper into the woods, tension thickening the air between us. Each step felt like a descent into madness, and I could feel the weight of the forest pressing down on me. I wanted to scream, to run, but I had to stay strong for Jake. I couldn't let fear consume me. Yet, every instinct in my body screamed that we should turn back. The trees began to close in around us, and I could feel the darkness wrapping its tendrils around my heart. I stole a glance at Sarah, whose face was pale, and I couldn't help but wonder if she felt the same fear I did. Sarah, I really think we should go, I said, my voice quivering. I don't like this. Emma, just a few more minutes, she urged, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. Before I could respond, a sudden rustling erupted from the bushes nearby, and we both froze in terror. What was that? I gasped, gripping Sarah's arm tightly. I don't know, she whispered, fear coloring her tone. We should stick together. Jake, I called again, my voice echoing in the oppressive silence. Where are you? But only silence answered. The weight of dread settled in my stomach as I realized that we were completely alone, lost in a sea of darkness. We had ventured too far, and now we were at the mercy of whatever haunted these woods. Let's head back. Now, I said, my heart racing. Okay, Sarah replied, her eyes darting around nervously. We can't panic. We'll find our way back. But as we turned to retrace our steps, I felt a shiver run down my spine. The forest was different now. It felt alive, as if it were shifting and changing around us. I could hardly breathe as we stumbled through the underbrush, the path we had taken now obscured. Emma, do you hear that? Sarah whispered, her voice barely above a breath. I strained my ears, and for a moment, I thought I could hear something. An echo of laughter, like a cruel taunt ringing through the trees. We need to hurry. I stood at the edge of the forest, my heart racing with a mix of excitement and unease. The sun was shining brightly, filtering through the leaves and casting playful shadows on the ground. Sarah and Jake were already a few steps ahead, laughing and joking about the adventure that awaited us. I wanted to share in their enthusiasm, but a cold shiver ran down my spine as I recalled the chilling legends I had heard about this place. Disappearances, whispers in the night, and the stories of those who ventured too deep and never returned. I hesitated for a moment, glancing back at the path we had taken. "Are you coming, Emma?" Sarah called, her voice cheerful and beckoning. I forced a smile and hurried to catch up with them, pushing the unsettling thoughts to the back of my mind. After all, I was here with friends. Nothing bad could happen, right? As we walked deeper into the forest, the sounds of our laughter mingled with the rustling leaves. The trail twisted and turned, leading us into a part of the woods I had never explored before. My excitement began to overshadow my fear. But then, something caught my eye. A strange glimmer among the trees, like a light beckoning me to come closer. "Hey, I'll be right back. I want to check something out," I called out, my curiosity getting the better of me. Sarah and Jake waved me off, engrossed in their own conversation. I stepped off the main path, following the faint glow that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The deeper I went, the more the forest changed. The air grew thick and heavy, and an unsettling silence enveloped me, broken only by the crunch of twigs underfoot. I pressed forward, my heart racing. Finally, I stumbled upon a clearing and gasped at the sight before me. In the center stood an altar, ancient and imposing, covered in strange symbols that twisted and writhed in a way that made my stomach churn. I felt a cold breeze sweep through the clearing, and the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. It was as if the forest itself was alive, watching me, waiting. A voice in the back of my mind screamed for me to leave. I turned back, panic rising in my chest. I had to find Sarah and Jake. But when I retraced my steps, a sense of dread washed over me. I couldn't remember which direction I had come from. The trees loomed closer, their branches clawing at the sky, making me feel even smaller. "Guys," I called out, my voice trembling slightly. "Sarah? Jake?" Nothing but silence answered me. My heart raced as I stumbled through the underbrush, the feeling of being lost tightening around me like a vice. I was alone, and the weight of that realization pressed heavily on my chest. Finally, I caught a glimpse of movement, a flash of color in the distance. I rushed towards it, desperate to find my friends. But as I approached, my heart sank. It was just a patch of wildflowers swaying in the breeze. I sank to my knees, trying to catch my breath. I had to find them. I had to get back. After what felt like an eternity, I stumbled back onto the main trail, relief flooding through me. But the relief was short-lived. I looked around, but Sarah and Jake were nowhere to be found. A chill crept up my spine as I called out again, fear creeping into my voice. "Guys, where are you?" I remembered the stories, the ones my grandmother used to tell, about friends who went into the forest and never came back. I shook my head, trying to banish those thoughts. This was different. This was just a hike. But as the shadows lengthened and the sun dipped lower in the sky, my mind raced with worry. Finally, I made my way back to the camp, my heart pounding in my chest. When I arrived, I found Sarah sitting by the fire, her face pale and drawn. Jake was missing, and a knot of dread settled deep in my stomach. "Emma!" Sarah exclaimed, relief washing over her features. "Where have you been? We were worried. I got lost," I replied, my voice shaky. I saw something in the woods, an altar. It was covered in strange symbols. I watched as Sarah's eyes widened, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. "You're kidding, right?" She laughed nervously, but I didn't join in. "It sounds like something out of a horror movie. Are you sure it wasn't just your imagination?" "I'm serious." "Felt wrong, Sarah. I think we need to get out of here," I insisted, glancing around for Jake. "Where's Jake?" She looked down, her shoulders slumping. "He went to explore a little while ago. He should be back by now." A cold wave of anxiety washed over me. "We need to find him. He could be lost, too." Just as I finished speaking, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the trees, sending chills down my spine. We both froze, staring into the darkness of the forest. "What was that?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I replied, my heart racing. "But we have to find Jake. Now." The gravity of the situation settled heavily between us as we made our way into the forest, our earlier excitement now replaced by a suffocating fear. "Emma, what if he's—" Sarah began, but she couldn't finish the thought. "Don't say it." I cut her off, trying to push the fear out of my mind. We couldn't think like that. We had to find him. As we moved deeper into the woods, the atmosphere grew thicker with tension. The trees were closing in on us, and the silence felt oppressive. Every rustle of leaves made us jump. I could feel the weight of the legends pressing down on me, and I tried to shake it off. "Look!" Sarah suddenly exclaimed, pointing to the ground. "There are marks here. It looks like something was dragged through the leaves." I stepped closer, my stomach churning. The marks were deep and unmistakable, leading further into the woods. "This isn't good," I said quietly. "We shouldn't follow them." "But we have to find Jake," Sarah argued, determination etched on her face. I could see the fear in her eyes, but there was something else too. A desperate need to believe that we could save him. "Okay, but let's be careful," I conceded, swallowing hard as we stepped onto the trail marked by the strange impressions. Each step felt heavier than the ultimo, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. As we followed the marks, I felt a sense of foreboding creeping up my spine. The forest around us was changing. The trees were twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. I wanted to turn back more than anything, but I couldn't let Sarah down. "Emma, do you think we'll find him?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I hope so," I replied, but even as I said the words, doubt gnawed at me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was waiting for us in the shadows. Then, just when I thought I might break down from the tension, we heard it again, a distant, haunting cry echoing through the trees. It was unlike anything I had ever heard before, filled with pain and despair. My heart raced and I felt my legs go weak. "Please, no," I muttered, panic rising in my throat. "We need to go back. This isn't right." But before I could say anything else, Sarah grabbed my arm, her eyes wide with fear. "What if that's Jake? We can't leave him." I looked into her eyes, seeing the desperation reflected back at me. She was right, we couldn't just abandon him. "Okay, let's keep going," I said reluctantly, my heart pounding in my chest. As we pressed on, the forest seemed to close in around us, the shadows growing longer and more menacing. I felt my breath quicken with each step, and the weight of the legends hung over me like a storm cloud. Finally, we stumbled upon a clearing, and my breath caught in my throat. There, in the center, was the altar I had seen earlier. It loomed ominously, covered in the same strange symbols, and my heart sank as I realized the significance of what we had found. "What is this place?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling as she took a step back. I didn't have an answer, but I could feel the darkness radiating from the altar, and a sense of dread washed over me. "We need to leave, now." But as we turned to leave, the ground beneath us trembled, and I felt an invisible force pulling me closer to the altar. I struggled against it, but it was as if the forest itself was alive, resisting our escape. "We have to go," I shouted, panic rising in my voice, but it was too late. The shadows around us began to twist and writhe, and I felt a presence closing in, something ancient and malevolent. "Emma!" Sarah cried out, her voice filled with terror. "What is happening?" "I don't know," I screamed, feeling the weight of dread crush down on me. "We have to get out of here." But as I looked back at the altar, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A figure was emerging from the shadows, its form indistinct but filled with a sense of dread. I could hardly breathe as I realized the truth of the stories I had dismissed so as sunlight filtered through the dense canopy of leaves above. I felt a thrill of excitement as we embarked on our hike into the depths of the forest. The air was crisp, and the sounds of nature surrounded us. Birds chirping, leaves rustling, and the distant gurgle of a stream. My friends, Sarah and Jake, were full of energy, joking and laughing as we navigated the well-trodden path. But beneath my excitement, a chill crept up my spine, a nagging fear sparked by the local legends of disappearances that had haunted this area for decades. "Emma, come on, don't fall behind," Sarah called out, turning to me with a playful grin. I forced a smile and quickened my pace to catch up with them. Yet, the stories lingered in my mind, tales of campers who had ventured too far and never returned. Each whisper of the wind felt like a warning, a reminder that we were just visitors in a realm that held secrets far older than us. As we trekked deeper into the woods, my curiosity piqued when I noticed a faint glimmer of light filtering through the trees, beckoning me from a side path. I hesitated for a moment, glancing back at Sarah and Jake, who were engrossed in a discussion about the best hiking trails. The pull of the light was irresistible, and before I knew it, I had stepped away from the main path, compelled to explore. "Hey, I'll just be a minute," I shouted back, trying to mask the anxiety creeping into my voice. They waved dismissively, and I ventured down the narrow trail, the underbrush crackling beneath my feet. The light danced just out of reach, flickering like a distant star. But as I pushed further into the thicket, the trees closed in around me, and my excitement turned to unease. The path twisted and turned, and soon I realized I had lost all sense of direction. Panic surged through me as I turned to retrace my steps, but the familiar landmarks had vanished. The laughter of my friends faded into silence, replaced by an oppressive stillness that seemed to swallow the very sounds of the forest. "Guys," I called, my voice trembling. No response. I pressed on, heart racing, each step feeling heavier as dread settled in my stomach. Then, as I stumbled into a small clearing, I froze. Before me stood an altar, ancient and imposing, covered in strange symbols that glinted ominously in the dim light. It felt as if the very air around me had thickened, pulsating with an energy I couldn't comprehend. I stepped closer, compelled by a mix of fear and intrigue. But the moment I crossed the threshold of the clearing, a cold wave washed over me. I felt a presence, dark and malignant, lurking just beyond the edges of my vision. My instincts screamed at me to run. I turned on my heel and bolted back down the path, heart pounding in my ears, desperately calling out for my friends. When I finally broke through the trees and stumbled back into the main trail, I was met with a haunting silence. The laughter and chatter of Sarah and Jake were nowhere to be found. "Guys!" I shouted, panic rising in my chest. I searched frantically, calling their names, but the only reply was the rustling of leaves, whispering secrets I didn't want to know. After what felt like an eternity, I found my way back to the campsite, but dread filled me as I took in the empty space. The fire pit lay cold, the tent flaps flapping gently in the wind, but my friends were nowhere in sight. I sank to the ground, breathless and terrified, my mind racing with possibilities. What if they had gone looking for me? What if they had encountered whatever I had seen at the altar? When I finally spotted Sarah's backpack, relief washed over me momentarily before the weight of my fear crashed back. I had to tell them about the altar, about the presence I felt. They would think I was overreacting, but I needed them to understand the danger. Taking a deep breath, I steadied myself and called out, "Sarah! Jake!" Moments later, Sarah appeared, looking slightly disheveled but unharmed. "Emma, where were you? We were worried sick." Her voice was sharp, but I could see the concern in her eyes. I went down a side trail and found something," I stammered, my words tumbling out in a rush. "There's this altar, and it has these weird symbols." I felt something was there, something wrong. She furrowed her brow, exchanging a glance with Jake, who had just rejoined us. "An altar? What are you talking about? Is this one of your ghost stories?" Jake teased, but there was a nervous edge to his voice. "I'm serious," I insisted, my heart racing. "This isn't a joke. I felt something dark. We need to be careful. What if it's connected to the disappearances?" Before they could respond, a chilling scream echoed through the trees, cutting the air like a knife. We froze, the blood draining from our faces as silence reclaimed the forest. A heavy sense of dread settled over us. Was that Jake? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. No, it came from deeper in the woods, Sarah said, her eyes wide with fear. We have to go check it out. Are you crazy? I shot back, panic rising again. I don't want to go back in there. What if it's whatever took those people? What if it's still out there? We can't just leave someone if they're in trouble, Jake said, his voice firm. We have to find out what happened. Against my better judgment, we agreed to search for whatever or whoever had cried out. The air felt thick with tension as we stepped back into the trees, the shadows seeming to close in around us once more. Every rustle, every snap of a twig sent jolts of fear through me. As we moved deeper into the forest, I couldn't shake the image of the altar from my mind. The symbols, the presence. What did it all mean? I glanced at my friends, their faces set with determination, but I felt a growing sense of despair. If only I hadn't wandered off. Eventually, we stumbled upon a clearing marked by strange, elongated impressions in the earth, almost as if something had been dragged across the ground. My heart raced, and I fought the urge to scream. What are those? I asked, pointing. Looks like drag marks, Jake replied, his voice low. But from what? We should go back, I urged, fear clawing at my throat. This is getting too weird, too dangerous. No, we need to keep looking. Jake's right. We might find something or someone, Sarah insisted, her voice firm. I felt a flicker of frustration rise within me. How could she be so reckless? As we ventured further, the atmosphere grew heavier, and I could feel the weight of something unseen pressing down on us. I tried to shake off the feeling, but it lingered, seeping into my bones. I couldn't shake the thought that whatever was out there, it was watching us, waiting. Finally, after what felt like hours, we returned to the campsite. The sun had begun to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows that danced menacingly in the fading light. My heart sank as I realized the unsettling truth. Jake was still missing. Where is he? I whispered, panic flooding my senses. We should have found him by now. We need to call for him again, Sarah suggested. Jake, where are you? But only silence answered, amplifying our growing horror. As the night deepened, our anxiety morphed into a palpable dread. My mind raced back to the stories my grandmother, Margaret, had told me, stories I had dismissed as mere folklore. But now, they crept back into my consciousness, intertwining with the reality of our situation. The forest was more than just trees and trails. It was a living entity, woven with the past, with secrets that begged to be uncovered. Maybe we should talk to my grandmother, I proposed, my voice shaking. She might know something about this forest, about the legends. Your grandmother? You mean the one who never talks about this stuff? Sarah replied, skepticism lacing her words. Yes, maybe she has answers. We can't just sit here and wait for something to happen, I urged, desperation creeping in. After a moment of hesitation, Sarah nodded, and we made our way back to the car, feeling the weight of the night pressing in around us. The drive back to town felt endless, the shadows of the trees seemingly reaching toward us as if trying to pull us back into their depths. When we arrived at my grandmother's house, the air felt thick with tension. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding. The familiar creak of the hinges sent a shiver down my spine as she opened the door, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. Emma, what brings you here at this hour? She asked, her voice steady but her eyes betraying a flicker of worry. Grandma, we need to talk. It's about the forest. I began, my voice trembling. Something happened while we were hiking. Jake is missing, and I found an altar with strange symbols. Her expression shifted, and I could see the walls she had built around her emotions crack ever so slightly. You shouldn't have gone there. You don't understand, she said, her tone urgent. Please, just tell me what you know. We need help. I pleaded. I had always loved the thrill of adventure. And on that day, the excitement of exploring the isolated trails of the forest with Sarah and Jake felt electric. The sun filtered through the leaves, casting playful shadows on the ground as we set out, each step echoing our laughter. However, beneath my enthusiasm lurked an unsettling chill. I couldn't shake off the stories I'd heard about the forest, the tales of people who had vanished without a trace, swallowed by the trees, their echoes fading into the wind. My friends brushed off my anxious musings with playful jabs, but the weight of those legends clung to me like a heavy cloak. "Come on, Emma. You're not scared, are you?" Jake teased, his voice booming through the trees. "Yeah, it's just a bunch of old stories," Sarah chimed in, her confidence unwavering. "We're going to have an amazing time. Just wait and see." I smiled, trying to match their enthusiasm, but my heart raced as we ventured deeper into the woods. The trees began to close in around us, their branches intertwining like skeletal fingers. It wasn't long before I noticed something glimmering through the foliage, a beckoning light that seemed to pulse with a strange energy. Unable to resist, I turned to my friends. "Hey, I'm just going to check that out over there. I'll be right back. Don't go too far." Sarah called after me, but I was already moving, drawn in by the mysterious glow. I stepped off the main trail, excitement bubbling within me, but with each step, the sounds of my friends faded into the distance. The forest felt different here. The air thickened, and an unsettling silence enveloped me. I pushed through the underbrush, my heart pounding as I neared the light. What I found stopped me in my tracks. An altar, ancient and covered in symbols I couldn't comprehend, loomed before me. The air around it buzzed with a malevolent energy, and I felt an icy grip around my heart. I stumbled back, panic surging through me as I turned to retrace my steps. "Guys?" I called out, but the only response was the whisper of the wind. My heart raced as I realized I was utterly alone. My friends were gone. Frantic, I rushed back to where I had left them, the trees seeming to mock my desperation. Sarah, Jake, but all I found was the oppressive silence of the forest, swallowing my calls. Eventually, I stumbled back to the clearing where we had set up camp, my chest tight with anxiety. "Guys!" I shouted, breathless, but there was no sign of them. The tent stood empty, a ghost of our earlier joy, and dread pooled in my stomach. Just then, I heard a rustling from the bushes nearby, and my heart leaped. "Sarah? Jake?" I took a hesitant step toward the noise, but instead of my friends, a hollow scream pierced the silence, echoing through the trees. I froze, my blood running cold as the sound faded into an eerie stillness. "Emma!" I whirled around to see Sarah emerging from the shadows, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. "What happened? Where's Jake?" I demanded, a sense of dread creeping in. "I don't know," she gasped, her voice trembling. He just vanished. One moment he was there, and then gone. It was as if the forest itself had swallowed him whole. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to run back to the safety of the town. But I couldn't abandon my friends. Not like this. We spent the night in a restless haze, the darkness pressing in on us like a suffocating blanket. As dawn broke, an uneasy silence filled the air. Something was terribly wrong. "Maybe he went back to town?" Sarah suggested, her voice small. "I'll check the phone." But when she pulled out her phone, the screen flickered with a no-signal message. "Emma, we have to find him," she insisted, her resolve hardening. "I don't know." I hesitated, recalling the altar, the symbols, the feeling of being watched. What if something's out there? What if it's... "Stop it!" Sarah snapped, her frustration boiling over. "We can't just sit here. We need to look for him." Reluctantly, I nodded. The fear gnawing at my insides was no match for the urgency of the situation. We set off into the woods, the trees looming ominously around us. With every step, the tension mounted. We followed the trail Jake had taken, our hearts racing as we searched for any sign of him. Then, we stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. Strange markings etched into the earth, swirling patterns that looked almost ritualistic. "What are these?" Sarah whispered, bending down to examine them. "I don't know, but they're not good." I replied, dread pooling in my stomach. We should go back. But Sarah's determination only intensified. No, we have to keep going. We can't leave Jake behind. As we pressed on, I felt the air grow thicker, heavier with an unseen presence. Shadows danced between the trees, and I could swear I felt eyes watching us. Just as I was about to voice my concerns, a voice emerged from the underbrush. Hey, you too. We turned to see a young man emerging from the trees, his clothes slightly disheveled, but his eyes were bright with curiosity. I'm Ethan, he introduced himself, stepping closer. I heard you calling for help. What's going on? I exchanged a wary glance with Sarah. We're looking for our friend, Jake. He's gone missing? I explained, my voice laced with anxiety. Ethan frowned, concern etching his features. This forest isn't safe. People have been disappearing for years, drawn into the depths of the woods. You shouldn't be out here alone. What do you mean? I asked, a knot tightening in my stomach. What's happening? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I've been studying the local folklore. There's an entity here, something ancient that feeds off fear. Each sacrifice only makes it stronger. Sacrifice, Sarah echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. Yeah, it's not just a myth. People have been taken to appease it, to keep it from harming the community. Ethan explained, his tone grave. The weight of his words hung in the air, suffocating me. We have to confront it, I said suddenly, a sense of purpose igniting within me. We can't let it take anyone else. Ethan nodded, and together, we made our way deeper into the forest, the shadows closing in around us. The altar loomed on the horizon, a dark silhouette against the twilight sky. I could feel the energy pulsing, a sinister thrum that resonated in my bones. We need to be careful, Ethan cautioned, glancing at me with a serious expression. If we're going to confront this thing, we need to be united. We can't let fear tear us apart. I won't let it, I replied, my determination unyielding. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that this path could lead to destruction. As we approached the altar, the atmosphere shifted, the air thick with anticipation. I could feel the weight of the forest bearing down on us, the trees whispering secrets I couldn't comprehend. What if it's too late? I wondered aloud, my voice shaking. It's never too late to fight back, Ethan said firmly. We have to believe that we can break this cycle. But the shadows seemed to laugh at our resolve. And as we stood before the altar, I couldn't help but feel that we were stepping into something far beyond our understanding. The forest held its breath, and I knew that whatever happened next would change everything. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the forest floor as I paced nervously in our camp. The weight of our recent discoveries pressed heavily on my chest. Jake was still missing, and the thought of him wandering alone in the woods sent shivers down my spine. Sarah was sitting by the fire, poking at the flames, her brow furrowed in concentration. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she bit her lip, lost in her own thoughts. Emma, she finally said, breaking the silence, what if we just respect the traditions? Maybe that's what keeps the community safe. I turned to her, incredulous. You really think that's the answer? Just blindly following some old rituals? Look where that's gotten us. Jake is missing, and I can't shake the feeling that it's connected to what we found. Sarah looked at me, her eyes flashing with a mix of frustration and determination. You're being reckless. We don't know what we're dealing with. If the community believes in these traditions, maybe there's a reason for it. We can't just throw everything away because of a couple of strange occurrences. A couple of strange occurrences? I scoffed, my voice rising. Jake is missing. And remember what we saw at the altar? Those symbols, the energy in the air. It felt wrong, Sarah. We can't just ignore that. She stood up, throwing her hands up in exasperation. What do you want me to say? That we should just forget about it all? That we should go back to our normal lives as if nothing happened? I can't do that, Emma. I can't just pretend everything is fine. Her words cut deeper than I expected. I wanted to scream, to shake her and make her understand the gravity of our situation. I'm not saying we should forget. I'm saying we need to figure out what's going on. We have to find Jake and get to the bottom of this before it's too late. Sarah crossed her arms, her expression hardening. And what if the community is right? What if by going against the traditions, we're putting ourselves in danger? You saw the fear in everyone's eyes when we mentioned the disappearances. They believe in this stuff for a reason. I took a deep breath, trying to rein in my frustration. I understand that, but we can't let fear dictate our actions. We have to think logically. If we don't find Jake, we could be next. Can't you see that? Her gaze softened for a moment, and I saw the conflict in her eyes. I don't want to lose anyone else. Not after what we've already been through. I stepped closer, my voice lowering. Neither do I, but we can't let fear control us. We need to take action. We need to search for Jake, and we need to do it now. As if on cue, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves above us. A chill ran down my spine, and I couldn't help but glance nervously into the darkening woods. Let's go, I urged, gripping Sarah's arm gently. We can't wait any longer. Sarah hesitated, her eyes darting to the trees. Finally, she nodded, though I could see the uncertainty etched on her face. Okay, but we stick together. No one goes off on their own. Agreed, I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We'll find Jake, and then we can figure out what to do about all of this. As we made our way into the forest, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. The trees loomed tall and dark, and the path ahead seemed to stretch endlessly. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, as if the very woods were alive and aware of our presence. Do you think he's okay? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I hope so, I replied, though I wasn't sure if I believed my own words. We'll find him. We have to. The deeper we ventured into the forest, the more the atmosphere shifted. The air grew heavy, and an unsettling silence enveloped us, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or distant animal call. My heart raced as we pressed on, each step echoing the fear that clawed at my insides. After what felt like an eternity, we stumbled upon a clearing. Moonlight filtered through the branches, illuminating a small, dilapidated cabin. My stomach twisted at the sight. What is that? I asked, my voice trembling. I don't know, Sarah replied, stepping cautiously toward the structure. But it looks abandoned. Or it could be hiding something. We shouldn't go in there, I warned, my instincts screaming at me to turn back. But Sarah was already moving closer, curiosity getting the better of her. Come on, Emma. We can't just ignore it. What if he's inside? I hesitated, torn between my fear and the desperate need to find Jake. Okay, but let's be careful. We don't know what could be lurking in there. We approached the cabin, the wooden door creaking ominously as Sarah pushed it open. A chill swept over me as I stepped inside, the musty air hitting me like a wall. The room was dimly lit, filled with old furniture covered in dust. Shadows danced along the walls, and I felt a sense of unease settle in my bones. Jake, Sarah called out, her voice echoing through the empty space. Are you here? Silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I could feel the panic rising within me, tightening around my throat. We should check the other rooms, I suggested, my voice barely above a whisper. We moved cautiously through the cabin, each creak of the floorboards echoing our trepidation. I peered into a small bedroom, its bed covered in a moth-eaten blanket. A chill ran down my spine as I caught sight of something on the nightstand. A small, tattered journal. Sarah, come look at this, I called, my heart racing as I picked it up. The cover was worn, the edges frayed, but I could make out a name scrawled on the first page. Margaret. What? Sarah rushed over, her eyes widening as she recognized the name. Is that your grandmother's journal? I think so, I replied, flipping through the pages. The handwriting was shaky, filled with drawings and notes about the forest, the traditions, and something darker lurking within. My breath caught in my throat as I read snippets of the text. She wrote about sacrifices, about the entity that lives here. What? Sarah exclaimed, her voice rising. This is insane. We have to get out of here. No, wait, I urged, holding the journal tightly. This could explain everything. If we understand the past, we might be able to save Jake. Emma, this isn't worth it. We're in danger just being here, Sarah shouted, her eyes darting around the room as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. Please, just give me a moment, I pleaded, flipping through the pages frantically. The more I read, the more I felt the weight of my family's history pressing down on me. She talks about a cycle, a need for sacrifices to keep the entity at bay. Sarah stepped back, her face pale. That's what they believe in the community. Maybe this is why they think following the rituals will protect them. I nodded, the realization hitting me hard. But what if it's a lie? What if we don't have to follow the cycle? What if we can break it? Emma, I don't like this, she whispered. Fear etched across her features. It feels wrong. I could see the doubt in her eyes, and it mirrored my own growing uncertainty. We have to keep going, Sarah. We have to find Jake before it's too late. Reluctantly, she nodded, and we continued our search through the cabin. The atmosphere felt heavier now, as if the walls themselves were closing in on us. I could feel the darkness lurking just out of sight, a reminder of the entity that thrived on fear and despair. As we stepped outside, the moon shone brightly overhead, illuminating our path. I felt a strange sense of foreboding as we ventured deeper into the woods again. Every rustle, every shadow felt like a warning, urging us to turn back. Do you think we'll find him? Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. I have to believe we will, I replied, though doubt gnawed at my insides. We can't stop searching. Not now. The deeper we went, the more the forest seemed to close in around us, the trees looming like sentinels guarding their secrets. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, lurking just beyond our line of sight. Emma, let's take a break, Sarah suggested, her voice strained. I need a moment to breathe. I nodded, though I could feel the urgency building within me. Okay, but just for a minute. We found a fallen log and sat down, the weight of the night pressing heavily on us. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. What if we don't find Jake? What if he's already... Don't say it, Sarah interrupted, her eyes glistening with tears. We can't think like that. I looked down at the ground, guilt washing over me. I just can't shake the feeling that it's my fault. I should have the moon hung high in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the ancient trees of the forest. I felt a chill run down my spine as I glanced at Ethan and Sarah, who stood a few feet away, their expressions a mix of determination and uncertainty. The whisper of the wind through the leaves seemed to carry the weight of our decision, and I could almost hear the forest breathing around us, as if it was alive and aware of our presence. Are you sure about this? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. I couldn't help but doubt the plan we had concocted. Confronting an entity that thrived on fear felt like a gamble with our lives. Ethan stepped forward, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. We have to try, Emma. We can't let it continue to take people. It's feeding off of the fear it creates. If we face it and show no fear, we might break its hold over this place. Sarah nodded, her jaw set with determination. I believe in this. We have to do something. If we don't, who knows what happens to the next group that comes here. We can't just turn our backs on this. We have to fight. I took a deep breath, trying to quell the anxiety that bubbled in my chest. Just hours ago, I had watched Sarah and Ethan delve into the ancient texts, gathering every piece of information they could find about the entity. The stories were chilling, of sacrifices and rituals, of young lives lost to appease a force that thrived in the shadows. The thought of confronting that darkness made my heart race. Okay, I finally said, trying to sound more resolute than I felt. Let's do this, but we need to stick together. No one goes off alone this time. As we approached the altar, I could feel the air grow heavier, almost suffocating. The symbols etched into the stone seemed to pulse with a life of their own, glowing faintly in the moonlight. My heart thudded in my chest as I recalled the whispers of the forest, the tales of those who had vanished without a trace. I shivered, remembering the altar I had stumbled upon earlier, a place steeped in darkness and dread. "Remember," Ethan said, breaking me out of my thoughts. "We need to stand together, no matter what happens. If it tries to manipulate us or plays on our fears, we have to stay focused. We can't let it win." I nodded, even as doubt gnawed at me. What if it tries to take one of us? What if it wants a sacrifice? "Then we fight," Sarah interjected, her voice firm. "We face it together. We can't let it take anyone else." We reached the altar, the three of us standing in a loose circle around it. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on us, the tension thick like fog. The moonlight illuminated the symbols, and I could almost imagine them whispering secrets, beckoning us closer. "Let's begin," Ethan said, lifting a small pouch filled with herbs and crystals he had gathered. "We need to ground ourselves and focus our intentions. This is about confronting our fears, not letting them control us." As he began to sprinkle the herbs around the altar in a circular pattern, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we could do this. Maybe we could face the darkness and come out stronger. I glanced at Sarah, who was watching Ethan with a fierce intensity. Her belief in our mission was palpable, and it ignited a spark within me. "Okay, let's center ourselves," I said, trying to match the confidence in her gaze. "We need to focus on what we want to achieve here, not on the fear." We all closed our eyes, and I took a deep breath, letting the cool night air fill my lungs. "We want to free the forest from your grasp," I whispered, almost as a prayer. "We are not afraid." The wind picked up, swirling around us, and the atmosphere shifted. I felt it, the presence of something darker lurking just beyond our circle. A shadow flickered at the edge of my vision, and I opened my eyes, my heart racing. "Did you feel that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, his expression serious. "It's here. Stay focused. Don't let it break our concentration." Suddenly, a deep rumble echoed through the forest, shaking the ground beneath our feet. The shadows around us seemed to thicken, coiling like smoke, and I felt a rush of fear clawing at my insides. I glanced at Sarah, who looked resolute, but I could see a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. "Stay together," I shouted, gripping her arm. "Don't let it separate us." A figure began to coalesce in the darkness, a swirling mass of shadow and malice. It hovered just beyond the altar, its form indistinct but undeniably menacing. A low growl reverberated in the air, chilling me to my core. I could feel the fear radiating from Sarah, and it threatened to consume me as well. "Focus on your fear," Ethan urged, his voice steady. "It feeds on it. Remember why we're here." With a deep breath, I forced myself to think of the people we had lost, of Jake and the others who had vanished into the depths of this cursed forest. I thought of the stories I had heard, the lives that had been sacrificed in the name of appeasing this entity. Anger surged within me, pushing back the fear. "You won't take anyone else," I shouted, my voice rising above the growing cacophony of whispers and growls. "We're here to end this," the entity roared, a sound that shook the very air around us. The shadows writhed, and I could feel its power pressing against us, trying to claw its way into our minds. I looked at Sarah, who was visibly shaken but still standing strong. "Don't lose hope," I called to her. "We can do this together." Ethan stepped forward, raising his hands. "We call upon the strength of our intentions. We refuse to be your pawns." The shadows recoiled slightly, as if our resolve had momentarily stung it. I seized the opportunity, stepping forward to stand beside Ethan. "We are not afraid of your darkness. We will break this cycle." The entity let out a howl that echoed through the trees, and I felt a wave of despair wash over me. "You think you can defy me?" It hissed, its voice a chilling whisper that slithered into my ears. "You are nothing but frightened children, playing at bravery." "No!" Sarah shouted, her voice cutting through the haze of fear. "We are more than that. We choose to fight. We choose to end this." For a moment, the entity hesitated, and I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. Maybe we really could confront it. Maybe we could sever the ties that bound it to this forest. Together, Ethan shouted, and we joined hands, forming a circle around the altar. The air crackled with energy, and I could feel a surge of power building among us. "Let's show it our strength," I cried, my voice ringing with determination. "We are not afraid." As we stood united, the shadows began to pulse and writhe, reacting to our collective strength. The entity shrieked, its form twisting in agony as our combined will pushed against it. The symbols on the altar glowed brighter, illuminating the darkness around us. "Push it back," Sarah yelled, her voice fierce. "We won't let it take anyone else." I focused on the energy we were creating, the bond of friendship and courage that connected us. I thought of Jake, of all the lives that had been lost, and I refused to let those sacrifices be in vain. The entity roared again, but this time it was a sound of desperation. The shadows flickered, and I felt a surge of adrenaline. We were gaining ground. "Keep going," Ethan urged, his voice steady. "We can do this." Just as I felt we were on the brink of victory, the darkness surged forward, trying to break our formation. I could see tendrils of shadow reaching for us, and panic threatened to overwhelm me. "Stay together," I shouted, tightening my grip on Ethan and Sarah's hands. "Don't let it separate us." But the shadows were relentless, and I could see fear creeping into Sarah's eyes. "Emma, I don't know if I can." "Believe," I cried, willing her to stand strong. "We have to believe in each other." As the entity lunged toward us, I could feel the weight of its malevolence pressing down, but I refused to back down. The memories of those we had lost fueled my determination. I thought of Jake and the laughter we had shared, of the dreams we had for the future. "We're not just fighting for ourselves," I shouted, echoing Ethan's earlier words. "We're fighting for everyone who has suffered because of you." The shadows recoiled, and I could feel a shift in the air, a crack in its power. The altar thrummed beneath us, and the symbols glowed brighter, illuminating our path. With renewed resolve, I summoned every ounce of courage I had. "We will not bow to you. We will not be your sacrifices." In that moment, the entity surged forward one last time, its form a twisted mass of rage and despair. But we stood firm, united in our strength. I could feel the energy flowing between us, a powerful bond that defied the darkness. The moon hung high in the night sky, casting an eerie glow on the forest floor as we gathered around the altar. My heart raced with a mix of fear and determination. Ethan stood to my left, his brow furrowed in concentration, while Sarah was to my right, her expression a mix of fervor and desperation. We had come to confront the entity that had haunted this land for generations, and now, with the chilling air wrapping around us like a shroud, we were about to face the darkness. "Are you sure about this?" I whispered to Ethan, my voice trembling slightly. The stories we had uncovered about the sacrifices weighed heavily on my mind. What if we were too late? What if the entity was already here, lurking in the shadows, waiting for a moment of weakness? Ethan turned to me, his eyes fierce with resolve. "We have to try, Emma. If we don't confront it now, it will only continue to take more lives. We can't let it win. Not again." I nodded, swallowing hard. I glanced at Sarah, who was busy arranging the items we had brought for our makeshift ritual. She seemed lost in her thoughts, her brow knitted as she arranged the stones and candles in a circle around the altar. I could feel the tension radiating from her. She was fully committed to this plan, believing it could save our community. But I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. "Sarah," I ventured cautiously, "are you sure we're doing the right thing? What if the entity isn't just going to let us leave after this?" She looked up, her eyes sparkling with a fervent belief that I wished I could share. "Emma, this is our only chance. We can't just sit back and wait for it to take more people. We need to act, and we need to act now." I opened my mouth to argue, but Ethan interrupted. "Let's just focus on the ritual. We need to stay united, all right? If we let fear take over, it'll find a way to exploit that." As we lit the candles, the flickering flames danced wildly, casting shadows that seemed to move and twist around us. The air thickened, and a cold wind swept through the clearing, making the hair on my arms stand on end. "Do you feel that?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, his expression grave. "Yeah, it's like the forest is alive, like it knows we're here." Sarah stepped closer to the altar, her voice rising above the wind. "We're here to confront you. We know you've been feeding on fear and despair, but we won't let you take anyone else. We demand that you reveal yourself." My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the weight of her words settling in the air around us. I wanted to scream for her to stop, but before I could, the atmosphere shifted. The wind howled, and the shadows deepened, swirling around us as if they were alive. "Do you really think you can challenge me?" A voice echoed through the trees, deep and resonant, sending chills down my spine. The ground trembled beneath our feet, and an unnatural darkness began to coalesce at the far end of the clearing. "Show yourself," Sarah shouted defiantly, but her bravado faltered as the shadows thickened and morphed into a shape. It was indistinct at first, but soon it formed into a shadowy figure, looming and menacing. "Foolish mortals," the entity hissed, its voice dripping with malice. "You do not understand the forces you are meddling with. You think you can sever the bonds of tradition and sacrifice? You think you can disrupt the cycle?" I felt a surge of panic rise in my chest. "We're not here to disrupt anything. We just want to end the suffering." The figure laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the trees. "Suffering is the essence of this place. It nourishes me. And you, dear Emma, you are the perfect vessel. Your fear, your pain, it will only make me stronger." "No!" I screamed, stepping back instinctively. I glanced at Ethan, who was staring at the entity with a mix of fear and determination, and then at Sarah, who looked entranced, almost mesmerized by the creature's presence. "Sarah, we need to leave," I urged, panic creeping into my voice. "This isn't what we planned." But Sarah shook her head, her eyes wide with a fervent zeal. "Emma, we can't back down now. We have to finish this." The shadows danced around us, and the entity's form flickered as it leaned closer, its dark presence enveloping us. "You are already too late, little girl. The cycle cannot be broken so easily. Your friend will pay the price for your defiance." A realization hit me like a cold wave. "No, Sarah, don't listen to it. We can find another way." But Sarah's face was determined, her voice steady. "Emma, this is our community's only chance. Sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good." "Not like this," I shouted, my heart racing as I felt the ground tremble beneath us. The entity's laughter echoed through the clearing, deep and mocking. "Embrace your fate, children. Your choices will lead to more than just your own demise." In that moment, everything seemed to freeze. I could feel the weight of the entity's power pressing down on us, filling the air with a palpable dread. I looked at Sarah, her expression unwavering as if she had already made her choice. But I couldn't let her go through with it. "Sarah," I cried, my voice desperate. "We can't do this. We can't just give in to fear. We have to fight it together." She hesitated for a moment, her eyes flickering with uncertainty, but the entity's shadow surged forward, wrapping around her like a serpent. "You cannot fight what you do not understand," it hissed. "Only through sacrifice can you find peace." "Sarah, please," I yelled, rushing towards her. "Don't listen to it. There has to be another way." But the entity tightened its grip around her, and I could feel the darkness closing in on me. Panic surged through my veins as I realized how close we were to losing her. In a moment of sheer desperation, I pushed Sarah away from the altar, my heart racing with fear. "No, I won't let you do this. Emma!" she screamed, her eyes wide with shock as she stumbled backward, away from the altar. "What are you doing?" The entity roared in anger, shadows swirling violently around us. "Foolish girl, you will pay for this defiance." "Emma, we need to stay together," Sarah shouted, but her voice was drowned out by the entity's furious wails. I could see the shadows reaching for her, hungry and relentless. In that moment of chaos, I felt a surge of resolve. "I won't let you take her," I shouted, my heart pounding as I stepped forward, ready to confront the entity head-on. But just as I reached for Sarah, the ground beneath us shook violently, and the entity unleashed a wave of darkness. I could see its true form now, a swirling mass of shadows and despair, eyes glowing with malevolence. "Your time is over, Emma," it bellowed, and before I could react, the shadows lunged at Sarah, enveloping her in a dark embrace. "Emma!" she screamed, her voice filled with terror as she was pulled away from me, disappearing into the void. "No!" I cried, reaching out helplessly as the darkness swallowed her whole. The last glimpse of her face burned into my memory, full of fear and betrayal. The entity's laughter echoed in my ears as I fell to my knees, despair washing over me like a tidal wave. I had lost her. In trying to save her, I had only sealed her fate. The weight of my failure crashed down on me, suffocating and unbearable. "Now you understand," the entity whispered, its voice smooth and taunting. "Your fear has fed me well, and now I will take what is rightfully mine." As darkness encroached upon me, enveloping the clearing, I felt a flicker of anger rise within me. I wouldn't give in. I wouldn't let this be the end. Not for Sarah, not for me, not for anyone. But as the shadows closed around me, I knew deep down that the battle was far from over. The forest was a labyrinth of shadows, and as I stood there, paralyzed by fear and confusion, the echoes of Sarah's desperate cries reverberated in my mind. The entity had swallowed her whole, and I was left alone with Ethan, our hearts beating in sync with the darkness looming around us. I could barely comprehend the gravity of what had just happened. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare from which there was no waking, the weight of loss pressing down on my chest like a stone. "What do we do now?" Ethan's voice broke through the silence, shaking me from my thoughts. His eyes, usually so bright with curiosity, were now clouded with fear. "We can't just stand here." I turned to him, my heart racing. I don't know. How could this happen? How could she? My voice cracked, and I felt hot tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. She was my best friend. Ethan stepped closer, his expression softening. "Emma, we need to think clearly. We need to get out of here. This place, it's not safe. The longer we stay, the more danger we're in." "Danger?" I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. "You think I care about danger right now? Sarah is gone. She's gone because of me." I wanted to scream, to lash out at someone, anyone, for what had just happened. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had pushed her away from the altar, desperate to save her, and in doing so, I had sealed her fate. "I know you're hurting," Ethan said gently, his voice steady, "but we can't let that entity take anyone else. We need to find a way to stop it." "Stop it?" I echoed incredulously. "How? We barely know anything about it. It's a shadow, Ethan. It's not even human." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his demeanor. "We know enough. We've read about the rituals, the sacrifices. It's tied to your family, Emma, your grandmother." I cut him off, the anger boiling inside me. "Don't you dare bring her into this. She's the reason we're in this mess. She's been keeping secrets, hiding the truth from me. If anyone's to blame, it's her." "Maybe so," Ethan replied, his tone firm. "But she's not the only one who knows about this. You have the diary. There must be something in there that can help us." I nodded, my mind racing. The diary. I had seen it again just moments before the confrontation with Sarah. It was filled with cryptic notes and sketches of the altar, and I had shoved it aside in my panic. "You're right. We need to find it." We stumbled through the underbrush, the moonlight barely penetrating the dense canopy above. Each rustle of leaves sent chills racing down my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. My heart ached for Sarah, her laughter and warmth now replaced by an unsettling silence that echoed in my ears. Finally, we reached the spot where I remembered leaving the diary. I knelt down, searching through the forest floor, my fingers trembling as I dug into the leaves and dirt. "Please, please be here," I whispered, desperation creeping into my voice. "Emma, over here," Ethan called, and my heart leaped as I turned to see him holding the diary aloft, its pages fluttering in the night breeze. "I found it! Thank God!" I breathed, taking the diary from him. As I flipped through the pages, the familiar handwriting of my grandmother greeted me, but the words felt heavy and foreboding. I scanned the entries, searching for anything that might shed light on what we were facing. "Look at this," Ethan said, pointing to a sketch of the altar. "There's a note here about a binding spell. It seems to suggest that the entity can be contained, but it requires a sacrifice." "No," I interrupted, the word escaping my lips like a shriek. "No more sacrifices. We can't do that." "I don't think it's suggesting that we sacrifice someone," Ethan reassured me, his brow furrowed in thought. "It might mean we need to offer something else, something that symbolizes breaking the cycle." I stared at the page, my heart racing. But what? What could possibly be enough to appease it? "Maybe it's something personal. A piece of yourself," he suggested, looking intensely into my eyes. "It seems like this entity feeds on fear and pain. If we can show it that we're not afraid, that we reject its power, it might weaken." "But how? I don't even know how to begin to confront it after what just happened to Sarah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan took a step closer, his determination shining through. "We can do this, Emma. Together. We just need to be brave. We need to face it at the altar again." I shook my head, the memories of Sarah's sacrifice flooding back. I can't go back there. What if it takes me too? What if it wants me next?" "We won't let that happen," he assured me. "But we need to act quickly. The longer we wait, the more power it gains. We can do this." His voice held a conviction that sparked a flicker of hope in my chest. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the diary in my hands. "All right, let's do it. Let's confront it. But if anything happens, if I feel like I'm losing control..." I trailed off, the fear gnawing at my insides. "We stick together. No matter what," Ethan promised. "We'll figure this out." With renewed purpose, we made our way back to the altar. The forest felt different this time, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath in anticipation of what was to come. Each step weighed heavily on my heart, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah was watching over us, urging us to keep going, to fight back against the darkness. As we reached the clearing, the moonlight illuminated the altar, casting eerie shadows that danced around us. I felt a chill in the air, a palpable sense of dread wrapping around me like a cloak. "Ethan," I whispered, panic rising in my chest. "What if it knows we're here? What if it's waiting for us?" "It will be, but we can't show fear. Remember what we read. We need to stand tall to declare our defiance," he said, his voice steady despite the trembling of his hands. I nodded, swallowing hard as I stepped closer to the altar. I could feel the energy pulsing around us, a dark presence lurking just beyond my line of sight. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan placed his hands on the altar, closing his eyes. "We need to channel our strength. We need to project our fears and pain into the universe, but also our hope. We can't let it feed on us anymore." Taking a deep breath, I joined him at the altar, our hands resting against the cold stone. "All right, together?" I said, my heart pounding like a drum. "Together," he affirmed, and I could see the conviction in his eyes. We began to speak, our voices rising above the whispers of the forest. "We reject your power. We are not afraid." As we chanted, I felt a warmth building inside me, a flicker of hope pushing back against the oppressive darkness. The shadows around us began to writhe, twisting and turning as if agitated by our defiance. "We are not your sacrifices," I shouted, the words spilling from my lips with newfound strength. The air thickened, and I could feel the entity's presence growing stronger. a looming shadow creeping closer. "You think you can defy me?" A voice hissed, echoing in my mind. It was chilling and seductive, drawing upon my deepest fears. "Get out of my head!" I screamed, clutching the diary tightly. "You don't own me. You don't own any of us." Ethan's grip on the altar tightened. "We're stronger than you. We won't let you take anyone else." For a moment, there was silence. The entity hesitated, and I could feel a shift in the air. But then, with a roar that shook the very ground beneath us, it surged forward, a mass of darkness and despair. "You will pay for your defiance." I felt the energy drain from me, fear wrapping around my heart like a vice. "Ethan," I cried, panic surging as the shadows began to close in. "We have to keep going. Don't let it take you," he shouted, his voice fierce. I could see the determination etched on his face, but my resolve was wavering. In that moment, I caught a glimpse of the diary in my hands. The diary! It holds the power to break the cycle. I realized, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I began to flip through the pages, searching for something, anything that could help us. "Emma, focus," Ethan urged, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to channel everything we have, our pain and our strength." I nodded, my heart racing as I found a passage that spoke of binding the entity, of using my own pain to create a barrier that would protect us. "I think I found something," I shouted over the howls of the entity. Ethan took a deep breath. Then as the moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow across the clearing where the altar stood, I felt a chill sweep through me. It wasn't just the cold night air. It was the weight of what I was about to face. I was standing at the edge of a precipice, both literally and figuratively, staring into the abyss of despair that had claimed my friends and threatened to claim me too. The reality of the situation bore down on me, heavy and suffocating. "Emma, are you sure about this?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would draw the entity closer. His eyes, usually bright and curious, were now clouded with concern. I wanted to reassure him, to tell him that I had a plan, that everything would be okay. But the truth was, I was terrified. I glanced back at the altar, the ancient stones worn smooth by time, covered in strange symbols that pulsed faintly in the moonlight. This place was alive and it was hungry. "I have to do this, Ethan," I replied, my voice trembling. "If there's any chance this will end the cycle, I have to try. For Sarah, for Jake." Ethan nodded slowly, though uncertainty lingered in his eyes. I could see him wrestling with the implications of my words. But what if? What if it doesn't work? What if it only makes things worse? I cut him off, frustration bubbling up inside me. "I've already lost them. I can't lose you too. You don't understand. This is my responsibility." Ethan stepped closer, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Emma, you don't have to carry this alone. We can figure something out together. We don't know what will happen if you go through with this." I looked at him, the warmth of his hand a stark contrast to the chill enveloping me. "What choice do I have? My grandmother, she made it clear. The cycle can only be broken with a sacrifice, and if I'm the one who has to do it, then so be it." Tears stung my eyes, and I blinked them away. The memories of Sarah's laughter, Jake's teasing, they flooded my mind. I could almost hear them now, echoing through the trees. "Emma!" I heard Sarah's voice, bright and full of life. "Come on, don't be such a scaredy cat. Let's explore." I shook my head, trying to dispel the phantom sounds. "I can't let their deaths be in vain," I murmured, more to myself than to Ethan. As I stepped towards the altar, a sudden gust of wind whipped through the clearing, rustling the leaves and sending a shiver down my spine. It felt like the forest itself was trying to warn me, to pull me back from the brink. My heart raced, each beat echoing in my ears. The air grew thick with an unnameable dread. "Emma!" Ethan's voice broke through my reverie. "Wait!" I turned to face him. "What if this is the only way? The only way to stop the entity from taking anyone else? What if I'm the one meant to do this?" He stepped closer, desperation in his tone. "You can't think like that. You're not just some pawn in a game. You're not meant to be sacrificed. But if I am? The question hung in the air, heavy and dark. What if it's my destiny? What if I'm the key to stopping it? Ethan's brow furrowed, and I could see the conflict within him. You can't just accept this fate. It's not right. The shadows around the altar seemed to deepen, coiling like serpents at my feet. It's not right? What do you know about what's right? You didn't lose your friends. You didn't have to confront your family's dark past. My voice trembled with emotion, a mix of anger and sorrow. Silence stretched between us, filled only with the distant rustle of leaves and the haunting call of an owl. Then, Ethan took a step back, his hands raised in defeat. I just don't want to lose you too, Emma. You're all I have left. The sincerity in his voice pierced through my defenses. I could see the fear etched on his face, and for a moment, I felt an overwhelming urge to abandon my plan, to run away from the altar and the forest that had taken so much from me. But then I remembered Sarah's scream, the way Jake vanished without a trace. No, I said firmly, squaring my shoulders. I won't let them down. I won't let fear control me. As I approached the altar, the symbols carved into the stone seemed to glow brighter, pulsing with a rhythm that matched my heart. My breath quickened, each inhale heavy with dread and determination. I could feel the entity lurking just beyond the veil, its presence suffocating, watching, waiting. Emma, please. Ethan's voice was frantic now, pleading. Don't do this. You're stronger than this. We can find another way. I turned to him, my heart breaking at the thought of leaving him behind, but I couldn't let his fear dictate my choices. I have to do this, Ethan. I can't live with the guilt of knowing I could have saved them and didn't. I climbed onto the altar, my hands trembling as I placed them on the cool stone. The symbols beneath my fingers thrummed with energy, and I felt the weight of the past pressing down on me. I closed my eyes and began to recite the incantation I had memorized from the ancient texts we had discovered. Ancient spirit of the forest, I call upon you. I seek to end the cycle of sacrifice and bring peace to those who have suffered. Take me instead of the innocent, and let it be enough. As the words left my lips, the air around me thickened, swirling with an unseen force. I could feel the entity's power responding to my call, coiling around me, pulling me deeper into its grasp. The shadows began to shift, taking form, and I opened my eyes to see a figure emerging from the darkness. A grotesque silhouette, a monster forged from fear and anguish. Sacrifice, it hissed, its voice a chilling whisper that echoed through the clearing. You will feed my hunger. Leave them alone, I shouted, my voice shaking with rage and fear. I am here. Take me. The entity paused, its form wavering as if considering my offer. You think you can bargain with me? You are but a fleeting shadow in my domain. I felt a surge of defiance rise within me. I may be a shadow, but I will not let you take anyone else. You've feasted on fear for too long. I refuse to let you control my fate. The forest responded, the wind howling around us, the trees bending as if in agreement. The entity shrieked in rage, and I felt its power pushing against me, trying to break my resolve. Memories of Sarah and Jake flashed before my eyes. Laughter, joy, friendship. I could feel their spirits urging me on, lending me strength. Emma! Ethan's voice broke through the chaos, desperate and raw. You don't have to do this. We can fight it together. But as I looked at him, I realized the truth. The entity was feeding off our fear, our desperation. It thrived on the very emotions that bound us. I could feel it clawing at my mind, whispering insidious lies, twisting my thoughts. And then, in a moment of clarity, I understood what I had to do. Sarah, Jake, I shouted, my voice carrying through the night air. I will not let your deaths be in vain. I choose to fight. I will not be your pawn. In that instant, the shadows converged, wrapping around me like chains, but I pushed back with everything I had. I felt the warmth of my friends surrounding me, their memories igniting a fire within my soul. No! I screamed, defiance pouring from me. You will not take me. A blinding light erupted from the altar as I channeled all my pain, all my love, into a single thought: freedom. The shadows recoiled, shrieking as the light enveloped me, pushing the entity back. I could feel its rage, its hunger, but it was nothing compared to the love I had for my friends. In that moment, I made a choice. I would not sacrifice myself to end the cycle. I would break it. The light expanded, filling the clearing, pushing the darkness away, and with one final surge of power, I shouted, "You have no hold on me." The entity howled in fury, and with a final flash, it disintegrated into the night, leaving only silence in its wake. I collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath as the light faded, leaving me trembling and weak. Ethan rushed to my side, his face pale with fear and relief. "Emma, are you okay?" I looked into his eyes, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of hope. I think we did it." But as I stood up, a chill ran down my spine. The shadows were gone, but I could still feel the weight of the forest around me, the loss of Sarah and Jake hanging heavy in the air. I had won the battle, but the war within me was far from over. "Emma," Ethan's voice trembled. "What about Sarah?"